I mean, surely you're meeting a lot of Muslim constituents these days, especially during Ramadan, and a lot of them are angry, a lot of them are upset at the Labour Party. What's your response to them?
Well, the choice of the general election, I mean, obviously I'm in a different position to the Labour Party nationally, but the choice of the general election is not between Keir Starmer as Prime Minister or somebody with a perfect policy on Palestine. The choice is Keir Starmer as Prime Minister or Rishi Sunak. That's the choice. That is it. There's only two choices. And how is Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister working for you? How's it working for you in relation to foreign policy? How's it worked for you in the last 6 months with Gaza? How's it worked for you in relation to your hospital? How's it worked for you in relation to your local school? How's it worked for you in relation to the cost of living crisis? How's it worked for you in relation to the last 14 years in austerity? And that's the choice. Or Keir Starmer, who's going to be a change Prime Minister, you get the option of allowing best to be the enemy of perfect or best to be the enemy of good. And if you don't vote for the Labour Party in the general election, it's one less for the Conservatives to get. And the Conservatives work on the basis that the opposition is divided. The Conservative Party is the most successful political party in the Western democratic world. Why? Because they know how to win elections. They will sometimes change the rules to make it easier to win, as they've done with my election. They brought in photo ID. So everyone needs photo ID to vote now. Why have they done that? Because 900,000 Londoners haven't got photo ID. Poor Londoners, black, Asian, minority, ethnic Londoners, those who live in rented accommodation tend to vote for me. They've also brought in first past the post. So if you vote for Green first or Lib Dem first or Independent first, you can't vote for me second. You've got to vote for just one person. That's why they're successful. And those who are unhappy with the Conservatives, if they splinter, don't be surprised if you wake up a day after the general election with Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister. How have the last 5 Conservatives worked out for you? Cameron, Johnson, May, Truss and Sunak.
It's a tough argument to put forward to a voter, especially somebody who is feeling heartbroken, moved by what's happening in Gaza, and is looking for a sense of leadership in their country, especially from their politicians. And if you talk to some of these organizers, the Muslim Vote, for example, the organization that is trying to mobilize different voter bases, they'll say that there is a 4% constituency in this country that's Muslim. In London, it's about 10%, right? And they have traditionally almost, assuredly voted Labour and have been taken for granted as a result. And now is an opportunity to show that the Muslim vote actually is something significant that should be paid attention to.
Well, let's deal with this. Muslims have been taken for granted. Which party allowed, for the first time ever, Muslim faith schools? It wasn't the Conservative Party. There were, historically in this country, Christian faith schools, Jewish faith schools. It wasn't Muslim faith schools. Who brought that in? It was the Labour Party. Which party brought in laws to protect discrimination against the followers of Islam? It was the Labour Party. Which party has supported those parts of our country which are the poorest, most deprived, where most Muslims live? It's the Labour Party. Which party cancelled debt of the poorest country in the world, Muslim majority countries? The Labour Party. Which party in government did more trade with the poorest country in the world who are Muslim countries? The Labour Party. Which party had the first ever MP of Islamic faith? The Labour Party. Which MP had the first member of the House of Lords of Islamic faith? The Labour Party. Which party had the first ever member attending cabinet who was a Muslim? The Labour Party. Which party had a candidate who stood to be Mayor of London and won the election in the most anti-Islamic, the most Islamophobic, racist campaign in history? The Labour Party. So look, we can talk about, the imperfections of the Labour Party. My point being is no party is perfect, and the choice in the mayoral election is me or the person you mentioned who said things clearly Islamophobic. That's the choice in the mayoral election. Only one of us is going to win. So do you want to wake up on May the 3rd with her as the mayor? And the choice in the general election is do you want the same old with the Conservative government? Because that's a choice. With respect, the choice isn't George Galloway as Prime Minister or Sunak. It's Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. And, one of the things I've sought to do as a politician my entire life is in a respectful, non-patronising way to embark on political education. We've got to encourage people to join political parties, get involved in mainstream politics. That's why I feel so strongly we shouldn't be banning protests, because that's how we become active citizens, right? And by the way, it's legitimate and right and proper for the people you're mentioning to hold politicians to account. That's the joy of a democracy, right? Being held to account. Media did a long interview, being asked challenging questions. That's the joy of a democracy. Yeah. And that's how it should be. And people should be angry about what's happening in Gaza. We've entered the last 10 days of Ramadan, the last 10 nights of Ramadan. It also happens to coincidentally to be, Easter weekend. That is Holy Land, according to the Christians, right? And so people are right to be angry. You can't wake up and watch those images and not either cry and weep or be angry. And, we got to call out our politicians, but the idea that we have a more stringent test on Labour when we're in opposition for the last 14 years than we do in the party of government, I think is a bit naive and a bit wrong.
We're months ahead of an election, a general election, and that could put Sir Keir Starmer into the position of Prime Minister. And a lot of people are watching the things that he says publicly, the things that he says on Israel, the things that he says on Gaza as indications of what kind of Prime Minister he's going to be.
The NHS and education and jobs and the economy and growth and equalities laws and employment laws, all those things as well.
There are British Muslims that say this is something that means enough to me that I am willing to let it decide who I vote for come the general election. It's hard to dismiss somebody when they tell that to you.
No, of course, you must never dismiss what voters say, and they are saying that. And people are, I've met, that isn't. Of course, we've all met people who are upset and angry and hurt. I've lost count of the number of Londoners I've met who've lost loved ones, in that part of the world in the last 6 months. It's heartbreaking. People have to decide if the election, the general election, is a referendum on how perfect or imperfect a party was. But, there are only two parties that can win the election, the Conservatives or Labour. And so, all I'd say in a respectful way, because of course I respect people's feelings, and, people are genuinely and rightly, and that's a good thing. That shows you've got a heart, upset about what's happening in Gaza. But be careful what you wish for, because it's happened before. When people have allowed best to be the enemy of perfect, and that would mean the Conservatives are in power for another 5 years, and I think that'd be awful, not just for the people in Gaza, but awful for this country as well, and across the globe, where we know in the past Labour governments have done a huge amount of good in parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, parts of the Middle East, in the Balkans, and so forth. And that's why it's important for people to realise we had 14 years of this, right? Keir Starmer has not been the Prime Minister for 14 years. No Labour politician has. The last Labour Prime Minister there was Gordon Brown, and look at the good that he did.
Do you have faith in Keir Starmer to lead effectively in foreign policy?
I do.